How's it going, you guys? So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about caffeine usage, healthy caffeine usage, and some of the recent movement of like NoCaf or decaf, and these types of communities of people who remove caffeine from their life and report all sorts of benefits and things. I'm going to talk about intelligent usage of caffeine in various forms and some of the differences between different forms of caffeine. And as I do so, I'll be drinking some delicious organic gunpowder green tea. And it is brewing Kung Fu style or Gong Fu style. Alright, so recently got a comment from one of my subscribers asking me about my thoughts on the seeming recent crackdown on coffee or whatever. A lot of people are cutting out coffee for their health. So I actually have engaged in multiple experiments of removing caffeine in its totality from my life throughout the last decade. It's been about 10 years that I've done this on and off, and so at a baseline, we have coffee, we have tea, we have guarana, we have yerba mate, we have guayusa, we have a wide variety of different caffeinated plants, cocoa leaf, or yeah, the cocoa leaf, or you know, cacao, and then what else? The cocoa nut, or whatever, or cola nut, and there's a couple other lesser known forms, but generally, most people who take caffeine, they're taking it in the form of coffee, they're taking it in the form of, you know, isolated caffeine supplements, you know, caffeine anhydrous. So anyway, first and foremost, I think removing caffeine for probably about, you know, I would say a minimum of 4 weeks, but usually around 8 weeks is when you'll be able to tell some of the results from the experiment. Removing caffeine for 4 to 8 weeks is probably a good thing for pretty much every single person who is a usual caffeine drinker to try. I don't think caffeine is, you know, inherently bad, you know, and I think like that can be said for a large majority of aspects of nutrition that people are quick to slap a label on. So I don't think caffeine is just plain out bad. In fact, interestingly enough, there's some communities in the health science field, like the Ray Peat crowd, who believe caffeine is a beneficial nutrient or an essential nutrient. But they also, a lot of them infer that refined sugar is also a healthful, beneficial nutrient. And I don't think you should be adding, and I'm talking cups of refined sugar to your coffee, these people do. I don't think that's healthy. Anyway, so I think that people would benefit if they did an experiment where they remove caffeine for a period of time. The reason why I think that is because a lot of people live for years and years, some people for decades, multiple decades at a time, drinking caffeinated beverages on a regular basis, and they have no clue how it feels to be off of it. So it's really easy to, you know, assume that your life is great and that you are healthy when you haven't actually experienced another side of that. So if you've never been without caffeine, you don't know whether caffeine is helping you or harming you. And what a lot of people find is when they do this no caffeine experiment, they notice they either, a lot of their depression even, I know that they say caffeine is an antidepressant, but a lot of people notice they remove caffeine from their life and their depression really gets relieved. After about 4 weeks, because 4 weeks, in the first 4 weeks that you do this, you're going to experience withdrawal symptoms, and all of your problems get worse. So your depression gets worse, your anxiety gets worse, insomnia gets worse. You know, if you have pain symptoms, because caffeine is a pain reliever, you'll have increased aches and pains and things, and you'll go through feeling like you have the flu basically for a period of 4 weeks. But then when you remove, when you see the other side, a lot of people report that their depression goes away, their anxiety is significantly relieved, and it's not like they're high or they're euphoric, which I think green tea is, you know, will make you feel that way if you brew it properly, but you just feel less anxious because a lot of caffeinated preparations, whether it's isolated caffeine supplements or coffee, these are the most notorious ones. I think green tea doesn't do this, and I think yerba mate does not do this either. But coffee and isolated caffeine will make you, it'll boost all your anxious properties because its net effect is a boost in cortisol and catecholamines, mostly catecholamines that boost stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. To a lesser degree, depending on the person and their nutrient intake and other things, they could have a spike in neuroepinephrine or noradrenaline, which is boosting in focus and things, and has a vasodilating effect, and a boost in dopamine, which makes them feel more motivated and energetic. What I think happens to a lot of people is that, and it's probably because of B1 deficiency, magnesium inadequacy, an inadequate intake of various nutrients, vitamin C, and other things that are directly involved in turning catecholamine amino acid precursors like phenylalanine, tyrosine, and L-DOPA, or more so tyrosine is the main one, into dopamine and noradrenaline rather than straight adrenaline and cortisol. So a lot of people don't know how the catecholamine cascade goes. I made a very in-depth video describing this with precursor vitamins and minerals and amino acids and how your body creates these neurotransmitters. So search my channel name plus catecholamine cascade or plus dopamine and search on YouTube. And as long as the algorithm's not fucking with me like it does a lot for my videos for whatever reason, you should find that video and you should look it up. But study the catecholamine cascade so you can understand why caffeine can work differently in different people. What you'll see if you look at this video, or if you understand this, so what happens is a lot of people, their nutrient status is inadequate for dopamine metabolism, and so they drink this caffeine and they get a significant boost in stress hormones relative to feel-good catecholamines like dopamine and noradrenaline. So in general, caffeine just stresses certain people significantly. And so there's a lot of people out there who they think that they have generalized anxiety disorder, but you see that they're drinking caffeine all day, or maybe they're one of those people, if you say, hey, you drink a lot of caffeine, you should quit the caffeine and maybe see if it benefits your anxiety. And they'll say, well, I only have one coffee in the morning. Well, that one coffee in the morning, you could be metabolizing it much slower than the average population. That one coffee could be lasting you anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. Now, that's a long stretch because generally for most healthy people, according to the literature I've seen, caffeine is completely out of the system after 18 hours, generally speaking. And after 12 hours, most of the effects should be gone, okay? Generally, after 3 hours for me, if I drink a caffeine supplement, after 3 hours, I feel a crash. And I'm talking massive doses of caffeine. I feel a significant crash around probably about 3 to 4 hours later. And so what I'm getting at here, though, is that your ability to metabolize caffeine, it varies depending on your individual metabolism. Generally, I believe it's NRF2, same enzyme that is involved in metabolizing alcohol and these things. Anyway, so if you experience, generalized anxiety disorder, you would probably want to try, limiting your caffeine or actually just removing caffeine from your life for a period of 8 weeks. That's the thing is it is an addictive drug. Caffeine is an addictive drug. I don't care what anyone says. It's significantly psychoactive. That's one of the most verified effects of caffeine is its psychoactive properties. They're clinically significant. They produce significant enhancements and changes in behavior and how the brain works, in your memory recall, your ability to multitask and or concentrate, and the list goes on and on and on. And so just like all psychoactive drugs that affect your psychology to that extent, which let me remind you, pretty much all foods, emotions, books, all external stimuli actually does influence your psychology to a certain extent, and they do actually influence your brain on a neurological level, a neurochemical level. But, you know, the point that I'm trying to make here is caffeine is an addictive drug, and it's one that is very socially acceptable, and a lot of people will benefit from removing, as an experiment though. So, you know, I'm drinking green tea as I make this, and I don't even know how much caffeine was in that pre-workout I had this morning, but I actually haven't really been drinking pre-workouts for like 3 years now. I've been more drinking coffee before my workouts and drinking tea the rest of the day, because I find that it's the isolated caffeine supplements that really do me in pretty hard. And if I drink some low quality coffee, I notice I get way more jittery than if I was to drink something that was shade grown, single origin, you know, and picked from beans that are not producing excess histamines and things. Well, anyway, what I'm getting at here is, that's the basic point here, is that a lot of people would benefit from no caffeine. So let me take it further now, and let me discuss more about my experiences with caffeine. So for me personally, I think so let's say, you know, so for me, if I drink 300 milligrams of caffeine on a regular basis, I start to notice my sleep quality goes down drastically. I start to notice that I have less tolerance for stress. I'm like, I have the overwhelming urge to cuss out people on the road. It seems like my impulse control starts to be harder and harder to control. Like, it starts to go down, and it's harder for me to think. I start to feel overwhelmed and whatnot, like mentally overwhelmed. In fact, I find if I drink too much caffeine at one time, I feel mentally and physically exhausted about 3 to 4 hours later, unless I get another hit of caffeine. Now, for me, like I said today, I took a really hardcore pre-workout supplement because one of my clients had given me free samples, wanted me to do reviews of them. And, you know, for me, I was like, kind of like, oh shit, like, I'm gonna do this. He's given me pre-workout, but I've sworn an oath to never do pre-workout again. Fuck. You know, I'm kind of like anxious just knowing that I'm going to drink this pre-workout, even if it's one time, because I know that I feel optimal if I drink a smaller amount of caffeine before my workouts from a whole food source, essentially. Even though coffee I don't think is a whole food, because you're processing it by, you know, making a bean tea is what you're doing. Or a bean soup. You're making a bean soup. That's what coffee is. It's coffee bean soup. So, I experience negative side effects from large doses of isolated caffeine supplements, and I notice if I drink a mega dose of caffeine from coffee, like there was one, it was called Not Kicking Horse. What was this one called? Damn it. I forgot what Death Wish coffee. It's supposed to be extra strong. It's supposed to have like triple the caffeine content. I actually noticed extreme euphoria, but I also noticed I was pretty hyped up, and I was jittery, but not jittery as stress hormone jittery. I was jittery in the fact of just way too hyped up, and I felt amazing. But But I notice if I drink like the $3 a pound like coffee that from my grocery store, the grocery store brand, I actually feel really anxious. I feel what I would call like I would call it a boost in cortisol is what I feel like, to significantly increase cortisol, where I get brain fog, I get like this like really uncomfortable physical stress feeling, and it doesn't happen even if I take quadruple the dose of a organic, shade-grown, single-origin coffee from a region that I know produces high-quality coffee. It's processed in a way that increases potential contaminants in the end product. So I know a lot of people would hate me or would they would disagree with me when I say this, but when I drink bulletproof coffee beans, okay, I don't buy that as much anymore because it's so fucking expensive, but bulletproof coffee beans with 100% certainty almost every time gives me the most amazing buzz ever. Like, it's a completely different product than when I buy, especially the supermarket brand. Now, when I just go and I go based off of what principles I know produce what I would consider a good buzz coffee, it can be hit or miss sometimes because, bulletproof coffee beans, their entire thing is to give you that good clear-headed buzz, and it's supposed to be lab tested with a special bulletproof process, and I'm doing air quotes with my hands because I don't know what kind of process that is exactly. From what Dave Asprey said, he said that he goes in and handpicks, his staff handpicks the beans, and he actually has a video where he shows the difference between the cheap beans supermarkets buy and the beans that he picks out. Is when in the unprocessed green form you have different damaged beans and things, and he buys the most perfect beans without damage, the ones and whatever. But I don't know why. I honestly 100% thought that they were spiked with like theanine or something, but I can tell you for sure that the bulletproof beans for some reason produce a completely different clean buzz all the time. But I generally will buy organic, single origin coffee from Peru. I think Costa Rica is okay. I've had pretty good luck with Brazilian coffee beans. Oh, you know what? The one that I really like is the Kona coffee beans. And I think the reason why is because Kona AA coffee beans are specifically picked because it's a specific grade of coffee bean that's supposed to be far superior to any other coffee bean. And so that might be why the Kona coffee beans are the closest thing I found to the clean buzz that the bulletproof coffee beans gave me. Is because Kona AA is not like an origin of where it came from or a region in the planet. But Kona AA is actually like a rating that the coffee beans have to meet specific guidelines in order to be called Kona AA. So I enjoy those a lot, and I find that to be a consistently high quality coffee. So some hacks that you can use. So first of all, moderate your intake. So if you're taking, anything over 200 milligrams at a time, you're going to build a tolerance fast, and you're more likely to experience a lot of the jittery feelings. So what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the so-called negative effects of caffeine mostly happen when you take too much at one time for your own body's ability to metabolize it. And so I've talked to a lot of high-level CEOs and high-functioning caffeine drinkers that I know. People are really busy, and what they say is either they keep their caffeine intake to the very early morning, or they do like a light to medium, like a weak doses in small amounts every like three hours or so. And they find that the smaller amounts of caffeine or the weaker coffee, smaller doses every couple of hours throughout the day, seems to give them a more steady, balanced buzz compared to, drinking like the biggest, strongest coffee dose that you can get at one time. Another thing is taking theanine. The standard dosage, as most people probably already know, should know if you're watching my channel, is 2 parts theanine to 1 part caffeine. So if you're taking 200 milligrams of caffeine, you're going to want to take 400 milligrams of theanine. Unless it's before your workout, then you want to do a 1-to-1 ratio of theanine to caffeine. Another thing that I found is when I take Mucuna Prurens, I don't get like horrible effects of caffeine, probably because Mucuna Prurens has a variety of compounds besides L-Dopa that actually helps to modulate dopamine expression. Not only does it provide the building blocks for dopamine, but it also, what would you say? Like the stimulation of dopamine is going to be more balanced as a whole due to some of these compounds. And so, another one is taking phenylalanine alongside coffee. I find that to give me amazing euphoria, because a lot of people also don't understand that one of the main things that caffeine does in general is that caffeine boosts, it stimulates dopamine release and these other catecholamine release. And so over time, a lot of the negative effects people seem to notice later on, after successful caffeine use for a while, is a depletion of their body's precursors to catecholamines. And so and this is my notion, I guess you can call it, but taking phenylalanine, I find 1,500 milligrams, I believe, was an amazing dose that I took. And combine that with vitamins, a tiny bit of vitamin C powder, about 100 milligrams, 100 milligrams of vitamin B1, and then 100 milligrams of magnesium. And if you do that, then you'll probably notice like you feel nothing but euphoria and focus. And that's a good hack that I should make a separate video about. So there's a couple other things to consider when it comes to coffee specifically, is that, and just in caffeine in general. So coffee inhibits the absorption of things like vitamin B1 and to a lesser extent minerals like magnesium. It also, caffeine in general, a lot of people talk about water excretion in regards to diuresis, being a diuretic. But what a lot of people miss is the sodium excretion and the magnesium excretion and potassium excretion. So dietitians nowadays, it's a trend to say, oh no, coffee is not a diuretic, or is a slight diuretic, but any diuretic effect that caffeine might have is offset by the amount of water that you drink alongside it. But what they fail to mention is it also increases the excretion of sodium. So for every 200 milligrams of caffeine, you lose something like 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium. And then I think 50 to 100 milligrams of magnesium, and something like 200 to 400 milligrams of potassium, something like that. And so maybe try, a lot of people, it's become kind of like a fad now, it's become popular now to add salt to your coffee, but I would say taking a half a teaspoon of sodium, or a half a teaspoon of salt, like Redmond's real salt or Himalayan salt, taking a half a teaspoon of salt with a little bit of magnesium and potassium before you drink your coffee is probably a good idea. And a lot of people probably should do this either way, especially if they're on a low-carb diet. People under-eat salt. And they wonder why they feel so bad. So, the tannins and things can inhibit the absorption of B1. There's a lot of potential effects of these compounds in coffee. And I haven't even talked about all these other ones like yerba mate, guayusa, etc., etc. So sodium depletion and various other nutrients. Some people are actually sensitive to the tannins in coffee. There's other compounds too. I mentioned theobromine before, but theobromine is generally not an issue. So, you know, and if you're avoiding beans on a paleo diet, does it not make sense to avoid coffee beans too? Because if it's the lectins you're trying to avoid, I'm pretty sure they come out in the water. And when you roast the coffee beans, I believe roasting coffee beans creates hydrocystic amines. Been a long time since I've even researched that, but carcinogenic compounds that can actually make some people maybe feel suboptimal. But, you know, honestly, the majority of the crap that I'm talking about later on in this video right now is insignificant. And I think most people just need to experiment for 8 weeks and see how they feel. I think it's probably a better idea, like for me, if I'm going to do an experiment like that, it's going to be just removing hard sources of caffeine, like isolated supplements and coffee. And then if I really need like a jolt of caffeine, I'll take like yerba mate maybe. And then just drink a lot of green tea. I think green tea actually has more of a net relaxing effect, because tea has theanine and it has other polyphenols in it that have been shown in some studies to prolong the absorption of the caffeine. And so instead of drinking, so if let's say you drink 100 milligrams of caffeine from green tea, well, you're getting probably about 20 to 40 milligrams of theanine, which isn't the 2-to-1 ratio that you would get from supplements, but you're getting approximately 20 to 40 milligrams of theanine with that 100 milligrams of caffeine. And you're also getting these polyphenols now that make that 100 milligrams of caffeine kind of stretch out longer, so that you might actually only be experiencing the absorption of maybe, I don't know, 40 milligrams of caffeine per hour or something like that. So that's just something to think about, is all the other compounds in these plants that interact synergistically or contraindicate each other, I think would be the word. So I'm not for or against no caffeine. I mean, I've done it before, and I've, you know, announced I was going to go on that experiment in February, and lots of crazy things. I think caffeine is a useful tool. I think if you are sleep deprived, or you do shift work, or you're a nurse, or you're a police officer, or you're doing a job that's really hard as it is, even if you had adequate sleep, but it's shift work, or you're working overnights, like, you should probably drink caffeine, in my opinion. You know, that's a good tool. Could you imagine doing like 12 hours straight of surgery while you're sleep deprived and you don't have caffeine? That's pretty intense. You know, and then like if you notice that you have better mental health when you drink caffeine, but then like after 8 weeks of doing a no caffeine experiment, you notice your whole life goes downhill, or your mood and your mental abilities go way downhill. You know, you've tried the experiment. That's the important thing, because a lot of people are like, oh no, I feel like crap when I don't drink caffeine, but then they've only gone like a week without caffeine before, and they've never actually gone over the withdrawals and then let their neurotransmitters regulate and things. You know, so going through the experiment's important, but if you've done the experiment and you notice the experiment sucked, you should probably go back to drinking caffeine maybe. Because, you know, tea has lots of documented evidence going way back of being consumed. Human cultures all over the planet, including indigenous cultures, have been drinking caffeine, you know, caffeinated plants forever. And I think a lot of the problems actually come from people abusing low-quality coffee, or abusing coffee and abusing caffeine supplements. And most of those negative effects can be offset with theanine. And green tea doesn't have the same physiological effects as coffee. You know what I mean? So, and then all the other plants that I haven't mentioned, like guayusa, which seems to be one of the most fascinating of all. So yeah, post your question and comments down below. Have you guys tried NoCaf? And I'll talk to y'all soon.